Greetings. Thank you for joining us again. This is Will with Perpetual Assets. Very thrilled to have back on the line our friend, Dr. Jim Willie. He is the editor of the Hat Trick Letter, which is found on the website, thegoldenjackass.com. Jim, welcome back, my friend. How are you?
Doing fine. A little depleted, but I'm doing fine. Going through a lot of weird stuff, Will, but that's all. It's all personal and office stuff. I mean, we've all got private lives. We all have office challenges, and I'm dealing with some things, but it looks like they're under control. And just watching the markets. The big event recently is the Italian referendum vote. Now we got another big deal event, which is the Fed pretty much announcing or admitting that they're going to do a rate hike. When they do such thing, I usually ask the question, so how are you going to lie this time? How are you going to deceive us on what you're really doing and calling it a rate hike? Mm-hmm. What are you really doing and what are you really hiding and what is your main concern? Though that's how I think. But there's a lot going on now, and a very interesting phenomenon has come up. And you see evidence of it, I call it the street level, but there's another higher level, and it's the VIG between the Chinese gold price and the London gold price. Mm-hmm. There's a difference of about $40 now.
Yeah.
Per ounce on gold, and that's about 0.5%, not quite. But the difference for silver is over 1%. Mm-hmm. I'm sorry, over 10%. What am I saying? Over 10%. So when I get complaints from clients who say, what's going on with the gold price? I don't understand why it just keeps on going down. I say, well, before we discuss it.
Here's I'm sorry, Jim.
Let me get to the higher level.
Yep.
Okay. Now, the Voice mentions that there's a very interesting phenomenon going on right now. And that is, if you want to buy more than $100 million worth of gold, you have to pay over $2,500 an ounce. Mm-hmm. And then I get more clients write to me and say, yeah, but it doesn't apply to me. I said, I know. You're in the street level where you're being deceived. Mm-hmm. You're in the street level where they allow a trickle to come down and to supply you so you could buy your 6 or 8 coins. Because you're not interested in buying $30 million, $80 million, or $110 million worth of gold bars. Mm-hmm. If you were, you'd be paying well over $2,000 an ounce, probably over $2,500 an ounce, because that's what the market is dictating. Mm-hmm. Yeah, but I don't understand. Okay, then maybe you're not going to understand. Okay.
Yeah, it's a
divergence.
It's a problem of supply at these prices. And just to piggyback on your comment a moment ago, I'm looking at the divergence between COMEX and Shanghai. This was as of about an hour and a half ago. $52.22 on gold per ounce. So that means it's $52 an ounce more expensive in Shanghai than in New York. And $1.91, almost $2 on silver.
Yeah. So we've got about 13% for silver and about 5% for gold. Mm-hmm. Okay, that's getting into, as one of my colleagues said this morning, that's getting into the range where you're going to start to see some pretty serious volume on arbitrage.
That's what I mean, at $50, those percentages alone, huge arbitrage opportunities if you have the means and the wherewithal to capitalize on it, right?
Yeah, and one of the big ifs for capitalizing on it is, can you avoid having it shipped from one location to the other?
Right.
Can you do your buying and your delivering and all your satisfaction of the contracts within your arbitrage? Can that all be done with the movement of a computer mouse?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Or a phone call, a voice mandate, an order. These are very tough questions, but I've been saying now for a few years, 2 or 3 years, once we get a serious divergence between the paper price and the physical price, mm-hmm. we're going to see things break. And now we're starting to see a difference even between the two paper prices, East and West. When you're talking about London versus Shanghai, you're not talking about paper versus physical.
Right.
You're talking about 2 locations, East and West, for the same corrupt paper price. Mm-hmm. Okay, so very interesting events going on. I mean, I expected a month ago that they would do a rate hike, mm-hmm. and they're almost pushed into it by the fact that the the 10-year yield and even the 1-year Treasury bill yield.
Mm-hmm.
They're both climbing. But Will, I got to share with you something that was handed to me by Euroraj, who's still very much in the Western financial industry. He said, Jim, he told me this a month ago, so I put it into the November newsletter. Here's the effect. Pardon me. I have a lot of phlegm, and I get really angry at people who say, Jim, you sniffle. Are you a Coke addict? I say, no, I sniffle because I have a little nasal drip because I'm talking so much.
Well, you just told me your story of your bicycle race yesterday and all the milk that you consumed. And, milk produces phlegm. When you have a cold, you're not supposed to drink it, Jim. So I should have told you the day before the interview, don't go drink a bunch of milk. You're going to be all phlegmy.
Okay. Well, now I've forgotten what I was talking about. What were we talking?
Something from Euroraj.
Oh, yes, Euroraj. He said, Jim, there's a very important phenomenon going on right now. We all know how China has disgorged a good $300 billion worth of Treasury bonds in the last several months or a year. Okay, they disgorged $250 billion just in the last 4 months of 2014. Okay, that's how they won the IMF decision to include the RMB. Their own currency. Okay, so we've got the Chinese already very heavily active in dumping Treasury bonds. Okay, that's a given. That's a given. So here's the new phenomenon coming, Will, and this is extraordinary stuff. The new phenomenon is the top Treasury bond holder right now is Japan. And the U.S. cannot afford to see Japan and China both dump their trillion. Mm-hmm. That would be $2,000 billion worth of Treasury bonds. That would be 10% of the entire U.S. government debt or more.
So now we're Japan's bitch?
Well, now, yeah, in a sense. And he said, here's what I'm hearing from my London contacts and U.S. contacts in Wall Street. He has more London contacts than Wall Street. He said, what we're hearing is that the Japanese, who hold $1 trillion now, a little more than the Chinese, they want a 2% VIG on their 10-year yield in Japan, the Japanese government bond, versus our U.S. Treasury 10-year yield. So that's, he said, why you're seeing our 10-year, the TNX. It moved up past 2% rather quickly, and they're blaming it on Trump. I mean, if we have a bad hair day, we're going to blame it on Trump.
Either
if you
Trump
run
or the
out of
Russians.
gasoline, yeah. If you run out of gasoline on the superhighway, it's Trump's fault. Mm-hmm. If you forget to buy bread at the store, that's Trump's fault. If we have more failures of the Bakken region for shale oil, that's Trump's fault. If you get a flat tire on I-95, that's Trump's fault. Okay, so the moronic level has hit. The point is that we are allowing the Treasury bond to rise in its yield. And what the U.S. has to do is make sure that the dollar doesn't fall with it, and it's not. Mm-hmm. The Japanese know how to hedge against their own currency. So they got that pretty much covered. But what they want is bond versus bond to produce a yield on their $1 trillion. What's 2% of $1 trillion?
A lot. Was it 200 billion?
I think it would be 20 billion.
20 billion.
Yeah, that's a lot of
quite a bit more than 200 million. Yeah, no, it's that. I mean, just the measly 2% on a number that big shows you.
Okay, so yeah, maybe we are Japan's bitch right now. You know, the old saying is, if you have too big a debt, you lose control of your country. First, you acquire a partner, and later you acquire a landlord. Mm-hmm. And that's what I think what China had become, and now what Japan is becoming. They're actually about to kick us off Okinawa and other islands. It's going to get very dicey because Japan wants to link up with China for the Silk Road and the Eurasian trade zone. They realize that the future's not with the United States.
Yeah.
We're debt-ridden. We're committed to war and fraud. What kind of future does that offer Japan? I mean, sure, we can continue to threaten to kill their leaders and their bankers, like we always have done, but they're holding our debt and they're demanding that we have interest rates right. So the Fed is going to be stuck to raise interest rates and watch them do, again, another very clever cartwheel with the reverse repo. And what will the result be? Well, the same as last time. If you regard the Treasury bonds as a Sears Tower, we're going to get another 50 floors, and we're going to see another 20 to 25% of the area for the footprint dwindle. So, smaller base, taller building, more vulnerable to the winds. And the way I like to say it is the winds are coming from the north with a lower oil price from Canada. The winds are coming from the east and China with Treasury bond dumping. And the winds are coming from, say, the west with all the wars. Wars are not good for the economy, people. Where are you getting this point except from the fascist business model advocates? Oh yeah, you get some design engineers to make a bigger and better bomb, plane, or tank. Where's the benefit for the economy? Where's the greater efficiency? Oh, then you get the stupidity in follow-up. Yeah, but you get all the reconstruction. Oh, my God. Okay, I'll tell you what. I want to burn down my house just so I can rebuild it and create jobs.
Stimulate the economy. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, in the West, we stimulate the economy like morons. We say put more money in consumers' pockets. Let me ask a simple question. When people borrowed their home equity in order to have greater spending in the consumer ranks, how did that work out?
Yeah. Well, people they picked up more properties, you know?
Well, yeah, now they're losing more properties.
They've lost them all, yeah. No, it's...
Well, they burned their furniture in order to stay warm, and then they ran out of furniture, and then they foreclosed. That's not good for the economy. The Chinese have the answer for the economy development. More businesses, less regulation, more investment, business investment. In the United States, you're having liquidation of business equipment.
Well, this is just going to be a reoccurring trend. I mean, we should see more countries take the route of Japan. I mean, as the criminal cabal in control of, the U.S. and Western governments loses more and more of its grip, and the petrodollar losing its grip, we're going to see other countries take similar suit. No, we don't want to blow each other up. We want to honestly trade and build things. Jim, today is December 15th, and we took a list of questions from the audience for today, and we have 4 pages here of fantastic questions sent in from the audience. So maybe we should get cracking on some of those. The last time you and I spoke wasn't that long ago. This is our normal quarterly chat, once every 3 months roughly, and God, so much has happened in 3 months. It was pre-election last time we spoke, and now we've had, of course, a Trump victory. We've had a recount effort. We're going through now electoral college, threats to change votes. Russian hacking is another one. We've had these email leaks through this Podesta. This is great that this was an email phishing. Did you see what caused all of these emails to be released with this Podesta hack and all this WikiLeaks hack? It was a phishing. No. A phishing email, phishing. It's when you get one of these emails that says, your information needs to be updated. Please update your password. And it's a scammer. It's a hacker trying to gain access to your information. Well, that's what happened, and somebody inside the DNC did it. Changed their password, and that gave access. That's what caused the WikiLeaks. But anyway, thanks to the WikiLeaks, we've got now satanic cultish elitist practices are coming to, practices plural, are coming to light. First it was spirit cooking a few weeks ago, and now it's Pizzagate, something even much more dark and disgusting, involving children.
Can I just make a comment regarding the nomenclature?
Please.
The names of words.
Yeah.
Whenever you hear pedophilia, it's far more than tickling a girl's tutu or grabbing a little boy's thingy. Yeah. It's more like putting them on an altar, disemboweling them, draining them of blood, and killing them in the name of Satan.
Well, I was hoping we would save that until later in the interview. But,
and they're calling it pedophilia so as not to shock you.
Yes.
And so that you will pass over it saying, well, that's just tickling little tutus and thingies.
Well, and Jim, now if you look at these articles that are being pushed, as I've watched the information war in the last few months, the complete collapse of the mainstream media through the election and now post-election, and now they're releasing articles like New York Times and Washington Post and all these, I'm a pedophile, but I'm not a monster. And then they're trying to like make this seem like it's just a sexual preference. Are you effing kidding me? Like,
this is child sacrifice, draining the bloods, disemboweling them, and murdering them in order to capture some kind of a sick thrill on a spirit release.
Well, these people are evil, and if you've studied any of their evil things that they do believe that doing bad things, blowing up a nightclub, for example, and killing lots of people, or staging a shooting and not staging one, but carrying out a shooting and killing lots of people. Of course, one like that can have multiple agendas, but they truly believe that they get power from the dark side, the dark realm, every time something like this happens, that something evil, that they capture a child's soul. And I mean, it's so dark and disgusting stuff.
It's very dark and disgusting, but it's related to the release of the soul from the murder. With the terror and the murder and the screams and the yowls. They believe they acquire some additional dark spiritual power.
And no, we're not talking about a movie set here, folks. We're actually talking about your former president, Congress people, senators. That's
Oh, and not just that. We're talking about Beyonce. We're talking about Jay-Z. We're talking about Madonna. We're talking about Lady Gaga. And we're talking about Katy Perry. By the way, Katy Perry could not get her career launched properly about 3 years ago. She was very frustrated. So she made a deal with the Hollywood entertainment producers and executives. She would be their satanic sex toy and be raped at parties. And that would enable them to decide to open doors to advance her career. Now she's all over the place. Reminds me of the Tab Hunter movie, Damn Yankees, from the 50s, where he sold his soul to the devil in order to be a Yankee star.
Meanwhile, Jim, I'm debating with my mom and my sister and some cousins and some other people in my life about the person that they not only voted for and campaigned for president, but when she lost, they're in tears, and they believe that all of their freedoms have been stripped and are going to be taken away by this misogynist, evil, racist, Islamophobic pig. I mean, you couldn't make this stuff up, man. I'm talking to my mom about the person she voted for who is criminally complicit. Forget about satanic dismemberment of human beings. We're just talking about fraud and criminal activity.
How about the 5 murders of the author of a book for exposing the Clintons and their murders?
Shit, 5.
And then the murder of three different Democratic National Committee members a day or two before their testimony, all 3 dead.
Yeah.
So there are 5 deaths just since June, and all of them were looking to expose Hillary. So I guess that's just happenstance. My favorite is the guy hanged himself and then he wrote a suicide note.
Oh, God. Jim, the lid is being blown off, though. I mean, maybe it's not, but it appears the lid is being blown off. I mean, we have mainstream media outlets talking about spirit cooking now. I mean, these people are backpedaling so hard, so obviously, for those of us that are awake.
I'd like to know what Obama was doing, Barack Obama was doing with that 9-year-old Chinese girl on his lap kissing her neck. What was he doing?
I missed that one, but I did see
I
did see Biden.
Is she dead now?
Oh, geez. I don't even know what you're referring to. But
well, there's a picture that's circulating around. Obama and Pizzagate, they're kind of linked.
Oh, geez.
Anyway, let's get off this topic.
Yeah, really, yeah.
If you don't mind.
Let's start with some questions here. Let's start with
I just had a guy, last thing I'll say, I just had a guy in Canada sign up again, and he said, Jim, I've been off the newsletter for the Hat Trick Letter for about a year and a half. The reason I got off was that I thought your conversations about the dark side went too far.
Yep.
And when you started mentioning that the bankers were Satanists, and some of the top executives of major corporations like the energy firms were Satanists, I canceled the newsletter. I'm back because I realized I was wrong.
And you were right.
And I was right.
Yes.
Jim Willie was right, and the guy was wrong. The client was wrong for thinking, oh, gosh, that's so silly. My brother, a year ago, June, told me face to face, Jim, I don't think there are any Satanists. I think that's just a bunch of weird stuff. And I said, well,
it's just art.
Apparently you don't know a lot of people in high positions of power. And he said, no, I don't. But I almost bumped into Rahm Emanuel. He's so cool. Oh, my gosh.
All right.
Okay, let's move on. We got a lot of finance economics here.
Unbelievable, right? So we took some questions from the field. Let's just fire off here. There's tons of them. This comes from Tom Hicks, our good friend Tom. How are you, sir? Is there any veracity to the theory that Hillary was sabotaged by the elite, so Donald would win the election or selection? Then Donald will try and implement somewhat free market solutions. So then the elites crash the system and conservatism/free markets get blamed and banished. Interesting.
Well, that's very possible. I do believe that Hillary got abandoned because she opened the ugly Pandora's box called the Clinton Foundation. There's some very powerful people, like dozens of very powerful people who would be implicated if the Clinton Foundation were fully exposed. I'm talking about sex slavery. I'm talking about pedophilia, child murder. I'm talking about trafficking. I'm talking about a lot of different things. Influence peddling, Russian uranium sales, a lot of illicit weapons sales, a lot of chemical weapons sales. They're all involved with the Clinton Foundation as a go-between, an intermediary to get things done. You pay them, and we'll arrange it. And the Clinton Foundation is a Canadian charitable organization. I think it should be shut down. If and when Bill Clinton dies, which could happen any month, from what I'm hearing, the guy who leads that kind of lifestyle has got some very serious, how should I call it, parasitic organism floating around in his body. Okay, if he goes, the Clinton Foundation is going to be shut down, and you're going to hear very soon afterwards that Hillary is not around anymore. Okay, so I believe some powerful people, implicatable, who could have been implicated by the Clinton Foundation, made their phone calls, made their deals, and cut a deal with Trump for, say, a favorable Secretary of the Treasury, a favorable Secretary of State, a favorable CIA director. Make sure he doesn't win, because if he wins, nothing's going to stop on the prosecution and the digging and investigations. So how do we stop it all but a flash event of Trump winning? And that's what I think happened, in addition to the legitimate initiatives toward reform. Now, apart from Secretary of State, Treasury, and CIA, I think we're going to get some very positive things for humanity. and that is the end of these fascist wars. The U.S. has to get off its fascist path. We have to get rid of the Patriot Act. I'd like to see Department of Homeland Security just eliminated. I mean, what they do? They attacked a Georgia institute in the last few months. That's now in the news.
Jeez.
They traced the hacking and the attacks to the Department of Homeland Security. Now, let me just give you a quick aside about Homeland Security. Back in 2001, all the different intelligence agencies were told, produce us 2 people to serve on DHS. We need to load it up with a staff. So each group, I'm talking about Defense Intelligence, FBI, CIA, Department of Justice, they offered their 2 stupidest, dumbest, ignorant little asses to be selected. They were discards. And now it's the discarded Homeland Security that is our agency to protect the fatherland. Now, they're not protecting anything. Okay, so yeah, there might have been a plan to avoid Hillary, but I'm giving you a reason why, to stop the investigation and exposure of powerful people, including like the Pope. I mean, including like Kevin Spacey, the actor. He's been exposed for going on the Lolita Express to the Bahamas with Bill Clinton.
That's a shame.
More than a few times.
I really liked his movies. That's a damn shame.
Well, you know, we don't really care whether he's a gay fellow or not, but when it comes to maybe slitting the throat of a little 14-year-old girl because he gets off on it, I have a problem with that.
Just a little bit. Yeah, just a little bit.
Anyway, but following, once Trump's in, I see a couple of very big dangers for Trump. If the Fed and the cabal of bankers want to disrupt Trump and his entire agenda, a good way to start is to raise interest rates, cause a bond market problem, and then he's going to be rescuing the situation and trying to be putting out fires when he really wants to start on his trillion-dollar infrastructure projects. There's another way to disrupt him, and it's at the higher level, macro level, and that would be to get, for all the central bankers, to go out there and start cutting deals with the East, the Asians, and the emerging markets to start rejecting the Treasury bill at port payments and force Trump to launch the new Scheich dollar so that it could be blamed on his watch.
Do you think, but will the Asian counterparts play ball with that type of a scenario?
Sure, because they'll get rid of the dollar as a currency reserve. They don't want it anymore. They don't want to pay Treasury. They don't want to accept Treasury bills
it's a hot potato.
At ports for payments. They don't want it anymore. They don't want the U.S. to launch their wars on Treasury bonds that are financed by the victims of the war. They don't want the dollar anymore as the international global currency reserve. They don't want it anymore. So force Trump to launch the new dollar, devalue it based on the fundamentals, which just happen to be $550 billion annual trade deficit, which just happen to be at least $1.4 trillion in a federal deficit. Will, I don't know if you're hearing the same thing I am, but we're on track for a $2 trillion deficit this year. Okay, so you have a new dollar launched. You're going to have to attract foreign capital because you can't print your way out of it anymore. You try to print your own money to cover your own debt, and you're going to get a Venezuela in Washington and New York. You're going to get a 200% increase in foreign currencies, and the import prices are going to go through the roof. They're putting zeros now at the end of the Venezuelan bolivar. That could happen to the United States if we get a domestic-only dollar. So thrust that on Trump, let him take the blame, let him deal with the crisis, and he's going to get away from his trillion-dollar infrastructure initiative. I think what Trump is eventually going to have to do is say, you know, this trillion-dollar infrastructure initiative is a good idea, and I want to get going on it, but more important right now is that we get 20,000 new companies per year, or 10,000 new companies per year, a big, big number, an ambitious goal. to be set up and created in the free trade zones of the 50 states. Give them corporate income tax breaks, give them property tax breaks, give them lots of breaks so that they're higher, and 1/3 or so of output is exported. We need to become more industrialized. We need to export more in order to relieve our $550 billion trade deficit. I guarantee you, if you sampled 100 people on the streets of America, United States, you would get probably 95% of them totally ignorant of both the size of our annual trade deficit and its consequences with an independent domestic-only currency.
Jim, you're being way too generous with 5% on that. Way too. There's no way. Have you watched any of Mark Dice's videos where he just tries to trade people a freaking silver? Give him a chocolate bar or a silver bar. I mean, come on, man. There's no way. I doubt 1%.
Okay, but look at the demographic that he's going after.
That's true. That's true.
He's not. You're not going into the downtown office buildings and that lunchtime in the office complex.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
Okay, right. He's targeting the dumbasses.
Oceanside Pier. It's the Oceanside Pier. Yeah.
Well, the Oceanside Pier, are they going to work that day, or are they going out on on their rollerblades?
Yeah, exactly.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay, so what do they know what the capital of Germany is? Really? I mean, I don't. Okay, my point is that most Americans don't know how big the trade deficit is. They actually think that heavy imports are good for the economy. Mm-hmm. And now I say, oh, really? What happens after 30 years when you have a lacking of the industrial base and you can't print your money in order to cover your deficits anymore? What happens to your new currency? Oh, I don't think – I had 2 or 3 discussions just in the last month with tourists who go to a certain sports bar that I like to hang out at once in a while. And I just asked them, I said, have you heard about the potential launch of the new dollar? Oh, no, there's not going to be any new dollar. Are you kidding me? What is that silly talk? What are you talking about? And he was from New York City. So I kidded him about, I said, do you drink the water in New York City? And he said, well, of course I do. I said, well, then you're subject to a brain disease that causes stupidity. Are you aware of that? And he said, no, come on, Jim. Come on, Jim. What are you talking about? And I said, well, do you know what the trade deficit is? He said, well, I know how to define it, but I said, do you know how big it is? And he said, I don't know, like 20 billion a month. I don't know. I said, it's 550 billion a year, so it's about twice what you said. I said, do you think it has any consequence for anything important? Well, not really, because everyone wants a dollar.
That's right. That's right.
How do you argue with a guy who says everyone wants a dollar? I said, what happens when they don't? Oh, yeah, but they all do. I said, what happens if you're wrong and they don't now because you read the New York Times?
Yeah, they said the same thing about the sterling, Jim. Come on. Not going to happen.
Yeah. Okay, well. Anyway, let's move on to the next question.
Let's move on. I want to give there's so many good ones on here. Does Trump represent, this is from our friend Connie Sampignaro, does Trump represent, and there's several questions here, so we'll read them, and then does Trump represent a faction within the deep state, Pentagon-related, that has taken control from the Bush, Clinton, Rockefeller faction? If so, are they aligning themselves with Zionist agenda against Iran? Appointed generals as well as bankers, Trump, his son-in-law, Willie Fairs, as a national security advisor, McFarland, and many other appointees that are pro-Israel. What, in your opinion, is their agenda geopolitically?
Well, tough question. I do believe that Trump has created a hidden coalition. Mm-hmm. And I've been thinking and saying now for a month, the way we're going to find out is to see his cabinet picks. When they have Rex Tillerson promoted as Secretary of State, the ex-CEO of ExxonMobil, who has significant contacts, business, and lots of experience with the Russians.
Right.
I conclude that Secretary of State has one primary objective of, let's end this conflict with Russia. Let's stop the propaganda against Russia, and let's eliminate the threat of war with Russia that includes conflagration toward nuclear. But there's more to this. There's always a second layer. It could be that the Rockefellers have separated themselves from Clinton Bush. What I'm hearing is that Clinton Bush are pretty much dedicated to the narcotics. Now let's just move away from the Clinton Foundation and all the influence peddling and, you know, pedophilia, child murder, and all that. It could be that Rockefeller, the remnants of Rockefeller, and I'm hearing that David Rockefeller might not be around anymore. And if he were to die, you're going to be the last one to hear about it. So he might not be around anymore, but there's still a Rockefeller influence and a clan of very powerful people who want to continue and further the Agenda 21 objective of reducing global population by, you know, a third to a half or more. You know, genocide.
Can we start with George Soros and all these Rothschilds and Rockefellers? I mean, if we're going to reduce the population, can we please start with all these freaking satanic criminals? I mean, you know.
Yeah. Well, you know, we're going to get some very weird things. There was a false story that Soros was dead.
Yeah.
And my guess is the source of it was Soros.
Probably. Yep. Yep.
What better way to get the hounds off than to say you're dead and to go into hiding? And, you know, where would he hide? I don't know. Romania? I don't know. Bulgaria, but probably not in his native Hungary. All right, so there might have been a deal cut. I've been saying for the longest time, Trump has changed his tune. Let's listen closely to his messages. And I got two, Will. I recited this on a different interview. Let's see if I can remember on the fly. There was a time back right before the big Super Tuesdays, big primary days, you know, like where 6 big states had primaries, where Trump had been saying, past tense, had been saying the Pentagon budget is just so big that it's responsible for like a third of the deficit, a half of the deficit. We need to bring down the military budget in order to bring down our deficits, because we're going to croak as a nation if we continue with all these outsized deficits. And then I noticed a few weeks later, he said, we need to make the American military, the U.S. military, so powerful and so strong that no nation would even think of challenging us. Is that a 180 flip or not?
That's quite the flip.
Okay. Then the other one, I might have a little more trouble remembering exactly what this was. He said we need to flush out all the ISIS terrorists and our connection with their sponsorship. Our funding from the U.S. side, our arming from the U.S. side, and our cooperation with U.S. allies to create ISIS, because it's a plague upon the world and they're destabilizing everything in front of us. Our way of life is at risk. And then about a month later, I heard we need to be very, very watchful, because the United States has been and always will be a target for terrorism. Now, is that a 180 flip?
Well, it is, but it's yeah, that's.
Maybe it's not 180, maybe it's a 160-degree flip.
Right.
But to me, it's a reversal of sorts. So I concluded two things. He made a deal with Langley, and he made a deal with the Pentagon.
Yeah.
You allow me to be president. You maybe produce some really powerful leaks in the last week of the of the campaign. I mean, I'm hearing more and more that the leaks regarding Pizzagate and pedophilia and Podesta and all that regarding Hillary and the foundation, I'm hearing that was from inside the Pentagon. That was defense intelligence.
Interesting.
Yeah. Okay.
Well,
so the third element, very important, is the dollar. What deals did he ever make? What signals did he ever give that involved a flip, where you could say, wait a minute, looks like he's making a deal with the devil in the Department of Treasury and Wall Street.
Mm-hmm.
And I've noticed nothing. But then we get a Goldman Sachs guy named Mnuchin.
Mm-hmm.
And what kind of a name is Mnuchin? M-N? My gosh. That's, I think, now M-N, you do see that in Greek. Like Nemosthenes, one of the Greek kings.
Mm-hmm.
One of the Greek gods for memory is, Minos, Nemos. Like a mnemonic device for memory.
Right.
That's M-N-E-M. That's from Nemos, I think, a goddess of memory. Anyway, I think it's Greek. But my point is that he's Goldman Sachs.
Mm-hmm.
And you're never ex-Goldman Sachs. You're just no longer working there, reporting to one of their offices. You're always part of their family. Mm-hmm. So this Mnuchin had a role in predatory property purchases from foreclosures by the hundreds. Mm-hmm. Okay? Now, I hope he got burned. A lot of these private equity guys did get burned in their mass property purchases, because what they didn't anticipate was the problems of managing the property and having foreclosed clients who wrecked the wrecked the pipes, wrecked the kitchen cabinets, knock out all the banisters, and put a sledgehammer to the walls.
Mm-hmm.
Try to rent that, yeah. Mr. Mnuchin. Okay, so I don't like part of what I see with Rex Tillerson from Exxon, because Exxon is Rockefeller.
Right.
Okay, I don't like that, but it could be that he's not really one of Rockefeller's boys. He was just one of their executives, and he's much more interested in keeping peace in the world with Russia, who he has business deals with. He was always a straight shooter with the Russians. I'm going with that.
Yeah, Jim, let's be honest. Let's think about this for just a minute, okay? It's obvious now that there is a massive evil force at very high ranks within our government, within world government, and there's this good and evil battle war that's been playing out behind the scenes for a long time, right? What JFK's quote, 8, 9, 11 days before he was killed, said there is a ruthless conspiracy within this country to enslave every man, woman, and child in this country, and I aim to expose this conspiracy before I leave this great office. I mean, that's what he said, and then he was killed a week later. What was it? Eisenhower warning of the power, the invisible power of the military-industrial complex. Anyway, it's obvious that this evil is powerful and big, and it's also very likely, if not obvious now, we're seeing with Trump, we're seeing with Putin, there are potentially good guys, good forces that have walked alongside a lot of these evil people and done business with them and still managed to do good things. So your point with this Rex gentleman might be very valid in just that. Just because he comes from Exxon doesn't mean he is Exxon, you know?
Uh-huh.
And that these guys probably have had to rub shoulders with a lot of these people and pretend that they're buddies with a lot of these people in order to survive.
Let me twist this around a little bit. Mm-hmm. If you wanted to remove the bad element of Rockefellers from U.S. government influence and activity, could you think of a better guy than Tillerson of Exxon? Mm. Maybe Tillerson didn't like some things that he saw. Mm-hmm. Now, I don't like painting with a broad brush. Mm-hmm. I have a hard time not doing so with Goldman Sachs, though. No, there's a reason for that.
Yeah.
I've rarely ever found an exception.
That's the culture. I mean, yeah.
They're in the culture of predation.
Yes.
In order to be a vice president at Goldman Sachs, I got this from a Goldman Sachs client, ex-client. No, ex-employee of Goldman Sachs who's a client of mine. Mm-hmm. He said, in order to get VP status, you need to show $1 billion fraud on your resume. Mm-hmm. This is very complete, very inclusive, very comprehensive Goldman Sachs evil way. I don't think that's quite the case with Exxon. I don't think all their executives are Satanists. I think some are. Mm-hmm. I'll never forget, 2 years ago, a client said to me, Jim, I come from a mid-sized Canadian oil energy, what do you call it, E&P, exploration and production company. Mm-hmm. And he said, I went to a meeting where I was to be a speaker at about 8 in the morning, and I went to the building at 7. I don't know if I ever told you this story, but I went at 7. and there was almost nobody in the parking lot an hour before really things began. And I heard noise from the end of the hall from where my office was. And the closer I got to it, the more I realized, well, that's not regular music, and that's not even conversation. That's something very different. Mm-hmm. So he started to become more cautious as he approached it. And he realized, this is satanic dirge music. Mm-hmm. So he very quietly and cautiously moved a curtain. And as he said, I didn't want to end up on the sacrificial altar. Mm-hmm. But he did not notice any child, tied down, sprawled, stripped. All he noticed was his own executive in a black robe with red trim and candles, and the music at a low din. Oy, oy, oy. So it's all.
So how did he perform on his public speech an hour later?
Well, he said everything went well, but he said I got the hell out of there afterwards.
Holy cow!
He said I'm not with that company anymore. So he really got the hell out of them.
Well, I sure as hell would have. I mean, if you see something.
There's another story. I don't think Rick Wiles of True News would be bothered to hear me recite his story. He was a young buck in his late 20s. Fresh out of school, a little bit of work experience. He tried to get a job as I believe it was an insurance and financial type of firm that managed money. So they had a big portfolio to manage. And he made it through the first round of job hire interviews, the selection process, the vetting. Mm-hmm. And in order to proceed to the second or third level, I don't remember which, he was told that he had to show up at 7 in the evening for a certain ceremony. And he thought that was very unusual, if not unorthodox, and maybe suspicious. So he went to the executive secretary and said, could you give me some material on what this ceremony is all about? Mm-hmm. Like, are there, I heard rumors that there's an oath that must be recited. And the secretary was hesitant, and he actually said to her, well, unless you give me something regarding the meeting, I'm not going to the meeting, and I'm done with this whole process. Mm-hmm. So she made a call and handed him some information, and it was an oath to Satan. And they all had to be on their knees with heads bowed, reciting the oath to Satan in order for winning not exactly a top-level position, but maybe a mid-level position where they would rise in the ranks potentially to become executives in future years.
These are just standard corporate standard operating procedures.
Well, I'm coming to learn, Will, that there are two firms in particular that are extremely suspect for Satanism, and that's energy and finance. Mm-hmm. And I have a couple of friends who say, well, don't leave out the press and don't leave out big pharma.
Oh, God, yeah. One of my favorites.
And maybe don't leave out military contractors. So those five, I think, are loaded with Satanists. I'm not saying 90%. I'm saying the top positions might have a lot more than a few.
Yeah.
Who else would love war and love fire and death but someone who's a military contractor? Look, if you don't have an active war, you just don't have a lot of business. So that's one reason the U.S. has had a war ever since 9/11. Mm-hmm. If one gets settled, we start another one. Afghanistan is kind of a mild war. That's a heroin monopoly operation.
Yeah.
But didn't take long before things began to erupt in Arab Springs all over the place in the Arab world. Mm-hmm. And then in 2014, we have Ukraine, which is pretty much a fire zone, and a test ground for micro nukes. And Syria and Yemen, I mean, gosh, why not? Mm-hmm. War is fun. We're selling a lot of military equipment, but I don't like the fact that we're selling phosphorus bombs to the Saudis who are dropping them in hospital and civilian areas.
Yeah, and Putin's getting blamed for it.
Well, if you have a flat tire, Will, it's Putin's fault. If you forgot to buy milk, it's Putin's fault.
I can't. I honestly, I was before the call talking with Jim about how my family and I are considering, relocating out of the country. I mean, not only considering, we're like laying down the plans for it, because I can't put up with this insanity anymore. I mean, like, I can't have my children in school dude, people believe this stuff. Like, not people listening to this interview, right? But the other 200, 300 million. I mean, it's just,
I was watching the news. I mean, CNN headlines in a restaurant the other day, and it said, "Is there conflict of interest with Trump's children being so closely involved to his administration and cabinet selections?" To which I say, well, how about Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton? What did Hillary ever do in her life to deserve to run and win the senator position in New York, except to be a woman and married to the ex-president?
Mm-hmm. Well, there's plenty of examples. I mean,
she didn't have any. I know.
Yeah, there's plenty.
I mean, now we're talking about little Chelsea running for Congress in a Manhattan district. Come on. I hope she loses badly. But will they rig the vote?
So
I mean, come on.
I want to. I want to touch back because I'm looking at one other question here from our friend Mark Herzog that ties in really well with these Trump appointments. And it reminds me of a conversation I had with my business partner Gus a week or two ago, and we were having one of our just, really heated conversations about what's going on in the world right now and how insane all this is, and yada yada. And we were talking about the draining of the swamp and these appointments that he's making. And Mark Herzog, a client and friend, pointed out that some of these appointments that he's making, some that you just mentioned. The other one, who is the woman whose husband was the designer or the founder of Blackwater? Mark pointed out that is he's surrounding himself with now the private military. So he's surrounding himself with these generals, with high-ranking brass from the Pentagon. Now he's going Blackwater. He's going private military. These might be decisions he's making for, we got plenty of cautious libertarians out there that are freaking out about these appointments. Freaking out. Wait a minute, you guys. There may be something in design here. My partner pointed out, dude, if he's going to drain the swamp, do you know what that entails? It entails an armed coup of our entire system.
Yeah. Let's not jump to conclusions regarding Blackwater. You may not be aware of this, but I've got information from Cato, my U.S. government informer source. Mm-hmm. Eric Prince was the head of Blackwater for the longest time. And he did some dastardly things. He finally told his handlers at Langley, I'm not going to do that. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to do that, and I'm not going to do that. Mm-hmm. What are you going to do? And they said, well, you're fired. Not only that, but we're going to smear you, and we're going to call you a terrorist, criminal, conspiracist, working in collusion with dangerous people who are enemies of the state. Okay, what did Eric Prince refuse to do? Murder heads of state, murder ministers of heads of state. Mm-hmm. He refused. He said, I'm not going to do that. You want me to...
Like Gaddafi?
Huh?
Like Gaddafi?
Well, yeah, that's a level, but maybe Gaddafi's Minister of Finance, who was in charge of the gold dinar.
Yep.
People like that.
Yep.
Okay. Now, he had no problem with murdering some guy from the Sudan who was doing gun running for whatever purpose. Okay. But when it came to murdering heads of state or ministers of state, he said, no, I'm not going to do that anymore. So they fired him and had contracts to kill him. Mm-hmm. So if Trump is hiring his wife, I do not conclude he's hiring someone from the swamp.
Right.
He's hiring someone who the swamp wants to kill.
Mm-hmm. Very, very good point.
Very different element there.
The entire 180-degree opposite, actually.
Or 160. I'm a mathematician.
God bless you.
I gotta admit something. There's a lot of fields of math. Algebra, I was great. Trigonometry, I was great. Mm-hmm. Calculus, I'm going to boast here. I was 91 percentile on the Princeton SAT super test on calculus. So 91 percentile for calculus. What I was not great on was geometry. My brother's great with geometry. I think we're really I'm not I know we look a lot alike, but my brother at times just seems like a real simpleton. Doesn't know what money is, but he has a college degree in economics. Doesn't know what fascism is, but he has a double major in political science. Doesn't know what Obama is. Doesn't know how to recognize a gay man. Doesn't know that Michelle is really Michael Robinson. Doesn't see his own congressman from his own Chicago district as a gay man hiring and buying a beard called Michael Robinson to serve as his wife with 2 borrowed children. Okay, so anyway, my brother's good in geometry, but I'm not great in geometry. I think it's one of the hardest fields in mathematics. But, you keep on going up the scale. There's probability and stochastic processes, and there's, renewal theory and time series and regression analysis. I was good in most of them, not so great in time series, not Fourier analysis. I was good in standard Box and Jenkins type of time series. Anyway, that's my little spiel on math. It's very hard to be expert in all the subfields of a discipline like mathematics. I was wretched in Lebesgue analysis, where the function of a number is 1 if it's rational and it's 0 if it's irrational. So what's the area under that curve? I don't give a damn. That was what I said to a professor, and I dropped the course. I didn't find that to be practical. So instead, I picked up statistical analysis, and that's the epitome of practical. Anyway, let's move on with the question. Little aside there.
Well, the interesting, I think, in the mention there of the studies of mathematics, the geometry, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it brings a different element to mathematics in the spatial element, right? Or am I wrong?
It does, and there are 2 sides of our brain. The left side is logical and analytic, and the right side is spatial. And I tried to develop my right side during graduate school, where we had to think in multiple dimensions, like, what's the area of a sphere? Well, okay, I can imagine that in 3 dimensions, but what's the volume of a sphere? Well, what's the volume of a four-dimensional sphere? What's the volume of a k-dimensional sphere? I know it. I have seen it. I used it in my doctoral thesis. But, you got to think in terms of spatial elements, like what's the projection of that body onto this plane? And that's what regression analysis is. It's the best linear formula that can relate, say, your height. Suppose you know your height, you know your waist size, and you know your shoulder width, and you know a few other things, your hand size, and you want to predict your weight. Well, height and waist size are very important. If your shoulders are big too, well, that's going to add, but not probably as much as your waist. And the size of your hand, well, that's going to add, but it's not going to really be big, because that just means you got bigger bones and they weigh a little more. Actually, they don't weigh a whole lot, but they carry a lot of tissue. So that's what projections are. And you got to be good at imagining the spatial projections for certain things in statistics and mathematics. And I found it to be very difficult. I found myself just staring out into space sometimes, out my window in graduate school, trying to imagine some things and develop my own spatial reasoning.
It's almost like for that other side of your brain, the conversation went off topic. Now you're thinking about spatially relevant things. You're out the window. You're not on track thinking about the ones and the twos. Jim, I don't know about our listeners, but I love your tangents. It's just one of the better qualities.
Let me give you another tangent if you like that tangent.
Okay.
Sometimes when I was really stuck in graduate school, really difficult problem set, I could solve 6 of the 8, but there were 2 that I was kind of stuck on. One, I'd go into Dr. I don't want to mention name, but one I'd go into my favorite professor and say, "Hey, John, how about giving me a hint on this? I've been busting my nut on this for a day. Give me a hint. Just give me a hint like a good old boy." And he said, "Well, okay, Jim, take a look at this and make sure to use this fact, okay? Use this fact as it bears on the definition of blah, blah, blah." And I said, "Okay, I don't see it right away, but I'll work on that." But then there might be the eighth problem where I just didn't know. I didn't know what to do, and I didn't want to go back to Dr. John and say, give me another little morsel, will you? Throw it at my foot. No, I didn't want, because I had a little bit of pride. I was one of the top doctoral students at Carnegie Mellon, and I had a little bit of pride. I didn't want to go begging too much, because the word might get around. So what I would do is I would get out my evil weed. I'd stoke up the bowl. And I'd go for a walk, and I'd think about that problem, and a different part of the brain kicked in.
It does engage a different part of the brain.
I won't say that it was successful every time, but I did get high every time. But some of the time, I solved it by just a different angle of perspective.
Now, kids, we're not advocating that if you're stuck on a math problem, you go get high, okay? That's not what we're saying here.
And if you tried Jack Daniels instead, I guarantee you will not solve the problem.
No, and you'll probably get in more trouble.
Yeah, okay. All right, so there's my little tangent off a tangent.
I love it.